This is part 2 of this World Series Blood Moon Prophecy video. You need to watch part 1 before watching part 2. I will leave a link to part 1 in the description box below this video. This World Series Blood Moon Prophecy video is one of the most important and amazing videos on this channel. There is another confirmation that confirms the relevance of the exact 9 years connection between the Dodgers' win on October 27, 2020 and the famous Game 6 on October 27, 2011. As explained, God uses Trump as his trumpet to trumpet and confirm his signs. And God used President Trump to confirm the signs on October 27, 2020. God also used President Trump to confirm his signs in Game 4 of the 2018 World Series on October 27, 2018. The main story of this game was the criticism of the Dodgers manager for pulling their starting pitcher too early from the game, thereafter blowing their 4-0 lead. The pitcher that was pulled was player number 44, whose name is Rich Hill. Prior to this Game 4, I was predicting that there would be a prophetic sign involving the number 4, and sure enough, there occurred this huge sign involving the number 4. President Trump tweeted his disapproval of the manager's decision to pull player number 44, Rich Hill, whose name is Rich Hill, and his tweet was a news story. This same day, the Dodgers blew their 4-0 lead through prematurely pulling their player number 44, was the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh that resulted in 4 police officers being wounded. The media reported that the mass shooting took place in the rich Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and this was the same day the Dodgers pulled player 44, Rich Hill. One reason I knew ahead of time to expect a sign involving the number 4 in game number 4 on October 27, 2018 is that this day was 444 days after the Revelation 12 rapture sign that occurred on the date 9/23 in 2017. And again, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to reveal the 44th president. As well, it was exactly 40 weeks after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem sign. On January 21st, 2018, Rocket Lab launched its promotional satellite Humanity Star, which was supposed to glimmer as it traveled across the night sky and be some sort of inspiration for humanity. Ultimately, the philosophy behind this Humanity Star that Rocket Lab stated was the religion of humanism, which symbolizes the Antichrist. As the religion of secular humanism is evil, and it is rebellion against God, and it is the religion of the Antichrist. It was supposed to orbit Earth for 9 months before returning to Earth. 9 months is the average human gestation period, making it a symbolic Antichrist Star of Bethlehem, as the Star of Bethlehem preceded Christ's birth. Therefore, the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem precedes the birth of the Antichrist. When asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his second coming, Jesus used the metaphor of birth pains. According to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. This is why the signs involving the number 4 in Game 4 on October 27, 2018 were exactly 40 weeks after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem. In other words, the signs involving the number 4 hint at this 40 weeks connection. And so to the signs involving the number 4 in this Game 4 on October 27, 2018, we have a 444 days connection and a 40 weeks connection. The 40 weeks connection is to the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem, which is a counterfeit to the real Star of Bethlehem that preceded Jesus' first coming. And the 12th chapter in the book of Revelation describes the great sign in heaven that will precede Lord Jesus Christ's second coming, And that sign was fulfilled in the night sky on 9/23 in 2017, and it connects with 444 days to this game 4 and the signs involving the number 4. In other words, to this game number 4 with its signs involving the number 4, we have symbolism for the sign that preceded the first coming and the sign that preceded the second coming. In other words, this game number 4 with its signs involving the number 4 is confirmation that the sign that occurred in the night sky on 9/23, 2017 was in fact the sign that precedes the second coming that is described in Revelation chapter 12. And this sign that is described in Revelation chapter 12 is the rapture sign, which depicts the rescue of God's faithful from the coming judgment destruction. And the Apostle Paul tells us that this rapture event will occur at the sound of the last trump. And trump in archaic English means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. And this is why God used President Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet his signs, to confirm these signs involving the number 4 in this game 4, which is confirmation of the Revelation 12 rapture sign. If you are not familiar with this most important sign, the great sign in heaven described in Revelation chapter 12, a sign that hundreds of thousands of Christians are aware of, if not a few million, it is explained in good detail in video number 5 in the playlist titled Most Astounding Information Ever. I highly recommend this most essential video. In fact, I recommend this entire video series 1 through 5. The original purpose of making these videos on this channel was to direct people to this video series 1 through 5 in the playlist titled Most Astounding Information Ever. It's very important. There are many things in these videos that you need to know. If you can't find this most essential video playlist on the channel that you are watching, look for these videos on the website predictionsproveit.com or trumpprediction.com. Also, this Revelation 12 rapture sign is described in detail on the website on the homepage, which is also a must-read. The signs involving the number 4, including player number 44 and the 4 wounded police officers in the Jewish synagogue shooting, because in Bible prophecy it is said that the Antichrist will persecute the Jews. 40 weeks after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem revealed the identity of the Antichrist as the 44th president. Also again, the story of Game 4 was the 4-0 blown lead. And this 4-0 blown lead hints at the number 40, which is 40. And again, it was 40 weeks after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem. There is yet another way in which God used this game number 4, with its signs involving the number 4, in order to confirm that the sign on 9/23 in 2017 was the great sign in heaven, the rapture sign, that precedes the Lord's second coming. When asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus used the metaphor of birth pains. And according to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. 40 weeks prior to Game 4 and its sign involving the number 4 was the launch of the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem, and it was supposed to orbit Earth for 9 months, which is also considered to be the average human gestation period. And again, the Revelation 12 sign depicts a birth, and this was depicted in the night sky. Exactly 9 months prior to Game 4 and its signs involving the number 4 was the day that scientists were baffled as to how 100 old-growth trees were snapped like twigs in Olympic National Park in Washington State. It is still a scientific mystery as to how this happened. In the Bible, dead or fallen trees symbolize spiritual death of a nation. This prophetic sign occurred in a national park in Washington State, which gave this national symbolism. These were old-growth trees that had been alive since the founding of America. God pairs the numbers 9 and 17 together to point to the Antichrist Barack Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017, and arrived in Washington, D.C. as the senator from Illinois in the 109th Congress, and will return to power in Washington, D.C. as the 47th president in the 117th Congress. On October 27, 2018, we received the signs involving the number 4 that identified the 44th president as the Antichrist. And 9 months back was the day of the mysterious fallen old-growth trees. In turn, this fallen trees sign was exactly 17 months after another extremely prophetic sign in the night sky. On October 27, 2016, Jupiter and Venus came the closest together in the night sky in many years. They came within 1/15th of a degree of each other. The mainstream media touted the 2015 Jupiter-Venus conjunction as the Star of Bethlehem, and the one in 2016 was a closer conjunction. This is because many people, including myself, believe that the Star of Bethlehem involved the Jupiter-Venus conjunction in 2 BC, when the two lights in the sky appeared as one. In the Revelation 12 rapture sign, Jupiter symbolizes the church. In the book of Revelation, Jesus said he will give his church the morning star, and that he is the morning star. Venus is known as the morning star. When Jupiter and Venus come together in a conjunction in the night sky, this symbolizes the Lord meeting his church in the air in the resurrection rapture event. Since the Jupiter-Venus conjunction in 2015, all 6 of the Jupiter-Venus conjunctions have been prophetic, but this one in 2016 was the closest. This was the main one, if you will. This is why this Jupiter-Venus conjunction that occurred on August 27, 2016, is exactly 2,222 days before the resurrection rapture event on the Feast of Trumpets on September 26, 2022. There are no words to describe this connection. It is astounding confirmation that the rapture is on the Feast of Trumpets in 2022. On the website predictionsproveit.com or trumpprediction.com, I explain how the 7 biblical feasts symbolize the appointed times in God's prophetic plan, and how the Feast of Trumpets symbolizes the resurrection rapture event. In other words, we can know that the resurrection rapture event will occur on a Feast of Trumpets, and we now know that it will be on the Feast of Trumpets in 2022. As well, the resurrection rapture event is a rescue from the persecution of the Antichrist and the Antichrist system, and the Antichrist will persecute God's saints through the VACCINE, which is the mark of the Antichrist. And as was explained before, this mark of the Antichrist is the inverse of the mark that was placed on those that were saved, which was a Tav mark, which is the last letter and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And this mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd of 22 books that have a total of 22 chapters. And so a series of 2s not only symbolizes the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, but it also symbolizes the Tav and the mark of the Antichrist. The mark of the Antichrist that will be used to persecute God's saints in the end times period, and from which God's faithful will be rescued from in the resurrection rapture event on the Feast of Trumpets in 2022. And again, the purpose of the prediction being made in this video is to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and to prove the conclusions that were just stated, which is that the resurrection rapture event will be on the Feast of Trumpets in 2022. Furthermore, God used President Trump to trumpet and confirm the signs involving the number 4 in Game 4 in 2018 that identified the 44th president as the Antichrist, and Game 4 was 9 months and then 17 months, which points to Obama, after the Jupiter-Venus conjunction in 2016, which is 2,222 days to the Feast of Trumpets, as in President Trump. And the rapture event will be the rescue of God's faithful from the coming judgment from the Antichrist. And this rapture will occur, as the Apostle Paul said, at the sounding of the last trump. God uses prophetic signs involving baseball pitchers on the pitching mound to symbolize from Bible prophecy the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. This is why in the extremely prophetic sign in Game 4, it was pitcher player number 44 on the pitching mound, which identified the 44th president as the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, which again is why exactly 40 weeks, which symbolizes a birth, before player number 44 on the pitching mound in the Game 4 sign was the launch of the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a perfect period or a complete period. Exactly 20 biblical years before the company named Rocket Lab launched its rocket with its Antichrist Star of Bethlehem was the day of arguably the most dominantly pitched game in history, when 20-year-old Kerry Wood threw 20 strikeouts. A fan just happened to bring with him that day almost 20 huge K signs. Each K symbolizes a strikeout. His 20 strikeouts in this game tied the record held by Roger Clemens, otherwise known as the Rocket. After the game, Roger Clemens called Kerry Wood in the clubhouse to congratulate him, but Wood had to have Clemens repeat 3 times that it was the Rocket that was calling before Wood clued in that the Rocket was Roger Clemens. Exactly 20 biblical years later, after the Rocket called 20-year-old Kerry Wood to congratulate him for throwing 20 strikeouts, was the day that Rocket Lab launched its Antichrist Star of Bethlehem. Again, God uses pitchers on the pitcher's mound to symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. This is why the day that 20-year-old Wood threw 20 strikeouts was exactly 23 years, which identifies Obama, before day 1 of the final 1,260 days period of the end times, which was May 1st and May 2nd, 2021, when the Dragon capsule with its Dragon crew splashed down, which will in turn be 1,260 days before the Antichrist will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. 7 times in Bible prophecy, it is said the final period of the Antichrist's rule will be for 1,260 days. However, as God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections demonstrates, this 1,260 days is in fact symbolic. The evidence as high as Mount Everest overwhelmingly confirms that we are in fact inside the 1,260 days period, and that the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ is in the autumn of 2024. Also, Kerry Wood played for the Chicago Cubs, a team that identifies Obama. And he wore jersey number 34, a number that God also uses to identify Obama, who grew up in Indonesia, a country made up of 34 provinces. The sports broadcasters said that Woods' pitching style reminded them of Nolan Ryan, the strikeout king, who also coincidentally wore jersey number 34. 7 years symbolizes the end times period, and exactly 7 years before Woods' dominant game on May 1st, 1998, was the day Nolan Ryan, the strikeout king, pitched the 7th no-hitter of his career on May 1st, 1991. Ryan was 44 years old, which identified Obama. Nolan Ryan pitched in the major leagues in 4 decades, beginning on 9/11 in 1966. And his high school record of 21 strikeouts in 7 innings lasted for 44 years and was broken twice by 2 different pitchers in the same week in 2009, the year that the 44th president was inaugurated. His record of 21 strikeouts in 7 innings is 3 strikeouts every inning for 7 innings, which is a 3 sets of 7, which hints at the 3 sets of 7 judgments in the book of Revelation, the 66th book in the Bible. Kerry Wood was a kid at the time and a big fan of Nolan Ryan, and he was in attendance at this game. The name Nolan Ryan in Irish means little king. From the Bible, a 30 years period symbolizes a king. The strikeout king pitched his 7th no-hitter exactly 30 years before May 1st and May 2nd, 2021, IR 20 in the Hebrew calendar, which began at sunset May 1st, and was the beginning of the final 1,260 days period of the Antichrist king's rule, who will rule the Temple Mount, hence why this Nolan Ryan pitching sign on the pitcher's mound. Also, Nolan Ryan pitched this game in Dallas, a city God uses in his judgment warning signs for the Evangelical Church of Laodicea. The strikeout king pitched his 7th no-hitter exactly 30 years before May 1st and May 2nd, 2021, the beginning of the final 1,260 days period. Again, this video began with the 7th no-hitter of the season when the Chicago Cubs no-hit the Dodgers on June 24th. The last pitch of Nolan Ryan's 7th no-hitter was a strikeout to Hall of Fame batter Roberto Alomar, player number 12, when he struck out swinging on his knee, which symbolized submission to Satan, Nolan Ryan symbolizing the Antichrist on the pitcher's mound, which symbolizes the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Player number 12 symbolizes the church because the number 12 symbolizes the church, and this occurred in Dallas, a city God uses in his judgment warnings for the American Evangelical Church. Exactly 30 years later, Roberto Alomar was in the news at the beginning of the 1,260 days because he was cancel cultured. There is a murderousness to cancel culture, and cancel culture is in truth a dress rehearsal for mass murder. Exactly 55 days after Roberto Alomar was cancel cultured was the day of the 7th no-hitter of the season, and as explained in the Field of Dreams prophecy video, God uses the number 55 to symbolize 5 times 5 equals 25, a number from the Bible that symbolizes the Temple Mount. 7 years symbolizes the end times in Bible prophecy, and exactly 7 years after Nolan Ryan, player number 34, pitched his 7th no-hitter by striking out player number 12, was the day that player number 34, Kerry Wood, pitched his dominant game, in which the only hit, which was a controversial hit, which kept him from getting a no-hitter, was from batter player number 12. Returning back to the confirmation of the 9 years connection between the famous Game 6 of the 2011 World Series on October 27, 2011, and the Dodgers World Series win on October 27, 2020. Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and confirm his signs. With his photo in front of the 10th president on October 27, 2020, Trump confirmed the prophetic sign involving player number 10 being pulled from the game in the middle of the game due to his coronavirus test. Also, on October 27, 2018, Trump confirmed the signs involving the number 4, including player number 44, who was pulled too early from the game, with his tweet expressing his disapproval. In both instances, Trump confirmed a prophetic sign involving a player being pulled prematurely from the game. The two signs involving players being pulled prematurely from the game occurred exactly 2 years apart, and these two signs were respectively exactly 7 years and 9 years after the prophetic Game 6 of the 2011 World Series on October 27, 2011. 7 years and 9 years connections are both extremely prophetic in God's signs. Therefore, Trump and players being pulled prematurely are second witnesses confirming the significance of these connections between these signs in these three World Series. And again, the prophetic Game 6 in St. Louis on October 27, 2011 was exactly 7 years after the prophetic World Series Blood Moon in St. Louis on October 27, 2004 that identified the 44th president. And again, God uses the city of St. Louis to symbolize judgment, destruction being at the gates of the city or nation. Exactly 7 years after St. Louis won Game 6 in the 11th inning and went on to win their 11th World Series in 2011, was the synagogue shooting on October 27, 2018, in which 11 Jews were killed. 7 years symbolizes the end times rule of the Antichrist that will persecute Jews, and this is why 11 Jews were killed in this prophetic sign on this day in 2018. Exactly 7 years after the baseball game that identified the Antichrist in 2011, with the team's win in the 11th inning in their 11th World Series win in their history. And the instances of the number 11 occurring in the Bible occur in context of the execution of God's judgment. And the home run that won that game was player number 23, and this player number 23 was also the MVP of the 2011 World Series, and the number 23 and jersey number 23 identifies Barack Obama, who was player number 23 when he played basketball in high school. What is also amazing about these connections is that in the 2004 World Series, on the night of the blood moon, the Red Sox swept the Cardinals 4-0 on October 27, 2004. The Dodgers blew their 4-0 lead on October 27, 2018. And in the prophetic no-hitter on June 24, 2021, the Dodgers lost 4-0 to Chicago, which is more revelation that the Antichrist is the 44th president who is from Chicago. Also, 4 pitchers pitched for Chicago in this Chicago no-hitter. This 4-0 loss for the Dodgers on June 24, 2021 was 972 days after the 4-0 blown lead in Game 4 of the World Series in 2018. In Strong's Concordance, the 972nd word in the Hebrew Old Testament is the word for chosen ones. This is appropriate because this 972 days connects 2 Dodgers games that are pointing to the Antichrist Barack Obama, from whom God's chosen ones, his bride, will be rescued by the bridegroom, the former name of the team Dodgers, before the severe persecution period of the Antichrist. And also, this 972 days connects to this Game 4 of this Dodgers World Series that they lost or blew the 4-0 lead. And again, that day was 444 days after the Revelation 12 rapture sign occurred in the night sky, the sign that depicts the rescue of God's chosen ones from the coming judgment by the Antichrist, the 44th president. 7 days after this 7th no-hitter of the season, pitched by 4 Chicago Cubs pitchers, in which the Dodgers lost 4-0, this 7th no-hitter was 7 days before the extremely prophetic signs that occurred on July 1st, including the tornadoes in Washington, D.C., on the same evening that the Washington Nationals Los Angeles Dodgers baseball game was rained out, and this game was called a game by the umpires right after the Dodgers had hit a grand slam, which is 4 runs. It's when the bases are loaded and the batter hits a home run. It is rare, and it is 4 runs. And this 4 runs grand slam that occurred right before the rainout on the day of the tornadoes in Washington, D.C., was 7 days after the 7th no-hitter that the Dodgers lost 4-0. This 4 runs connection to the 4-0 loss by the Dodgers gives us a pairing of 2 4s, which hints at the 44th president. And this grand slam 4-run home run was hit against the team from Washington, D.C., giving this national symbolism and making it a judgment sign against America. And the tornado on this day traveled a path of 4.4 miles. It paralleled directly down the National Mall, paralleling Constitution Avenue, and stopped just 2 blocks before the White House. It peaked wind speeds were 90 miles per hour, which symbolizes the number 9, which from the Bible symbolizes judgment. And it occurred right at 9 p.m. And the second tornado touched down in Kingman Park in Washington, D.C., giving this Antichrist King Barack Obama symbolism. And again, also on the day of the tornado and the rained out game in Washington, D.C., there was the extremely prophetic collapsed building, and this too was 7 days after the day of the 7th no-hitter, which was the day of the collapsed tower in Surfside, Florida. The main purpose of the end times period is to test the faith of the Christians that will not make the rapture, which will be the vast majority of people that call themselves Christian. Jesus said to pray always that we may be worthy to escape the things that are coming. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. The book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 11, tells us that those that love not their lives unto death will be rescued from the persecution of the Antichrist, and will be raptured, which is in line with Jesus' teachings. For example, John 12:24, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Also from the book of Mark, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Unfortunately, because of corrupt doctrinal teaching, mainstream evangelical culture today completely ignores the seriousness of the myriad of passages like this. So, if we are to pray that we may be counted worthy to escape the things that are coming, and if those that escape are the ones that loved not their lives unto death, therefore those that will not make the rapture are those that love their lives in this world, those that are living worldly lives barely indistinguishable from other non-believers. This is the vast majority of Christians today, which is the very reason why the end times is happening now. Who will be worthy of escaping? Those that have already sacrificed their lives for Jesus. Those that have already given him everything they have. Those that have already demonstrated their faith and passed the test of faith. Those that have already had a death of the self and have died to this world, or are continually dying to this world. The end times is in fact an act of God's love. The purpose being to induce self-sacrificial demonstration of faith for him. The persecution from the Antichrist will be the wake-up call for those that have not already sacrificed everything for Jesus. In the end times, there is a good chance they will be required to demonstrate their faith through a martyr's death. The main theme of God's big picture of end times patterns, signs, and connections is judgment warning for the church, specifically the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea. The Feast of Pentecost symbolizes the church, and fire symbolizes Pentecost, as it was tongues of fire that came down on the disciples in the upper room on the first Pentecost that symbolically began the church age. This is why God uses church roof fire signs. The Antichrist Star of Bethlehem was 40 weeks before Game 4 and the 4-0 blown lead by player number 44. This confirmed the Antichrist is the 44th president. Exactly 44 months after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem was the day of a fire on the roof of the stadium that the New Orleans Saints football team play in. God uses the New Orleans Saints to symbolize the American church. The news story regarding this fire was focused on how it occurred just days prior to the season home opener for the Saints. The season opener was against the team from New York City. This fire, just before the Saints opener against New York, occurred on the same day that the United Nations in New York had its official opening for the year. This was the day when the leaders of the nations delivered their speeches at the United Nations in New York. This connection was a sign because the Antichrist president will lead America into a new incarnation of the United Nations and will lead a world government. The 44th president, Antichrist, will rule the world. And this is why exactly 44 months after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem was the day of the UN opening and the fire on the roof of the stadium for the Saints, just days before their opener. What is astounding confirmation of this 44 months connection is that the Saints won Super Bowl 44. Super Bowl 44 in 2010, shortly after Obama became the 44th president, contained many prophetic signs which are explained in other videos. This fire in New Orleans on the roof of the stadium for the Saints, the team that won Super Bowl 44, occurred 23 days after Hurricane Ida pummeled New Orleans. This is a pairing of the numbers 23 and 44 that confirm the signs and identify the 44th president that wore jersey number 23. Furthermore, to this roof fire in New Orleans, we have a 44 months connection to the prophetic sign, the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem sign, and a 23 days connection from the hurricane in New Orleans, which is another pairing of the numbers 23 and 44. Ida was a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricane Ida occurred on the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans, which was 4 times 4 years ago. The day before Ida landed, when it was off the coast of New Orleans, was the day that the Marine Exchange of Southern California reported how a record 44 cargo ships were waiting off the coast of California. The New Orleans Saints were scheduled to play the Arizona Cardinals in a preseason game, but the game was canceled due to Hurricane Ida. This mirrored how the nation's most debauched festival, Gay Mardi Gras, was canceled because it was scheduled for the same day that Hurricane Katrina landed in New Orleans. The team Cardinals is Antichrist symbolism, as it points to the first of the two Antichrists, Pope Francis and his cardinals at the Vatican. The same day as Hurricane Ida landed was the day that Joe Biden attended the ceremony at the airport for the dignified transfer of 11 of the 13 military service members that lost their lives in the bombing in Afghanistan. Biden infamously looked at his watch one time per service member as they were unloaded from the Air Force plane. From the Bible, the number 13 symbolizes the Antichrist, which confirms the significance of Ida on the same day being 4 times 4 years after Katrina, which identifies the Antichrist as the 44th president. Hurricane Ida, on the day that Biden looked at his watch 11 times while 11 military service personnel were transferred, was 111 weeks and 1 day after Hurricane Barry hit Louisiana and was known for its blackout power outage of 153,000 customers, on the same day as the Manhattan blackout on July 13, 2019. In his autobiography, Dreams of My Father, Obama said that changing his name from Barry to Barack symbolizes who he is today. And another video on this channel explains how the dream that he described in his book is a prophecy that revealed he is the Antichrist today. 111 weeks and 1 day hints at 4 ones, which hints at the 11th hour of the 11th hour. There were 9/11 signs in the Manhattan blackout. Again, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that hit the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union. Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out, as in last chance for the nation to repent. The 11th hour of the 11th hour means that time is really, really running out. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a perfect and complete period of waiting. A 20-year period in God's signs is extremely prophetic. America got into a war in Afghanistan because of 9/11. The collapse of Afghanistan on the 20th anniversary of the collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11 is a massive 9/11 sign and a symbolic completion of the grace period that America had to repent after 9/11. What confirms this 9/11 symbolism in this 111 weeks and 1 day connection between Hurricane Barry and the Manhattan blackout to Hurricane Ida and Biden's attendance at the dignified transfer of 11 of 13 military service personnel that died in the collapse of Afghanistan is that the National Weather Service in New York issued their first ever flash flood warning when the remnant of Ida hit New York. The death toll from Storm Ida in the New York area reached 45, which is hinting at the death of the 45th president, who is from New York. The New Orleans Saints won Super Bowl 44, and the fire on the roof of their stadium, named the Superdome, occurred 23 days after Hurricane Ida hit New Orleans. Ida occurred 4 times 4 years after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. One of the things Katrina is most known for was the displaced residents that sheltered at the Superdome. In other words, the fire on the roof of the Superdome 23 days after Ida was pointing to the Superdome in the days after the massive judgment sign that was Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina hit America during the forced pull-out evacuation of Israeli residents from the Gaza Strip in August of 2005, which was something that America pressured Israel into doing, which was against God's prophetic word regarding his Holy Land. Katrina was part of a pattern of such storms that were clearly judgment on America for trying to divide Israel, God's land. This pattern is explained in the Most Essential video series playlist titled Most Astounding Information Ever, which you can view on this channel perhaps, or view it on the website predictionsproveit.com or trumpprediction.com. In the Bible, a period of 7 years symbolizes the end times period. Katrina hit New Orleans exactly 7 biblical years before the 23rd of July in 2012, which was the day a massive coronal mass ejection missed Earth by 9 days in the sun's 25-day rotation. This was a pairing of 9 and 23. The strength of the storm was comparable to the Carrington event in 1859 that caused damage to electrical equipment worldwide. Had the coronal mass ejection in 2012 hit Earth, it is likely it would have inflicted serious damage to electrical systems on a global scale, and the study that was done showed that it's possible we would still be recovering from it to this day. This 2012 coronal mass ejection, therefore, would have caused massive blackout power outages. Hurricane Ida connected to Hurricane Barry that hit Louisiana and was known for the power outage blackout it caused. Barry also occurred on the same day as the extremely prophetic Manhattan blackout. Hurricane Ida also connected to Hurricane Katrina, which connected with exactly 7 biblical years to the 2012 coronal mass ejection. The 2012 coronal mass ejection, in turn, connected with exactly 7 biblical years to the extremely prophetic Feast of Pentecost in 2019. On this Pentecost, on June 16, 2019, occurred the massive power outage in Argentina that left 44 million people without power. Argentina is where the first Antichrist, Pope Francis, is from, and God uses Argentina to point to Pope Francis, from whom the 44th president will get his power. This is why 50 days after the 44 million people power outage on Pentecost, and Pentecost means 50th day, was the day of the power outage in Jakarta, Indonesia, that killed 4 people on the 44th president's birthday. The 44th president grew up in Jakarta, Indonesia. These power outages in Argentina and Indonesia, 50 days apart and on Pentecost, identified the first and second antichrists that will persecute the church, as Pentecost symbolizes the church. 9 years connections are extremely prophetic and symbolize judgment. The 23rd of July in 2021 was the 9th anniversary of the coronal mass ejection on the 23rd of July in 2012. This is a pairing of 9 and 23. On the 23rd of July in 2021, the S&P 500 stock index made a new all-time high and gained 44 points. This is a pairing of 23 and 44. The S&P 500 stock index in itself symbolizes the Antichrist, as the 500th Greek word in Strong's New Testament Concordance is the word for Antichrist. July 23, 2021 was also exactly 9 years and 11 months after the extremely prophetic Washington, D.C. earthquake in 2011. 44 days after the S&P made a new all-time high and gained 44 points was the day of the prophetic Black Swan event in Tiananmen Square in China. A Black Swan event is a financial term used to describe a surprising and negative financial event. This Black Swan event is explained in other videos on this channel. This Black Swan event was in turn another 44 days before the plane crash that was leaving the 4th biggest city in the US and was on its way to Game 4 of the playoffs, which in turn is 4 times 4 days before November 4th, and the day the stock market will peak and then begin its biggest crash in all of history. It will be a black swan event. This black swan event is also 60 days to November 4th, and Barack Obama will become the Antichrist at the age of 60 years old. According to the media, Dallas is the capital of evangelicalism. Dallas is also the home of many of the theological schools that produce the sheep instead of leaders that preach the corrupt doctrine in churches across the nation. Dallas is the main home of and is known for its theological seminary schools that teach the false gospel and Nicolaitan doctrine that is sovereign grace, and Dallas is especially known for its free grace, otherwise known as unconditional grace, or easy believism, also called cheap grace, and properly known as antinomianism, Latin for anti-law. I'll just say a few brief words regarding this corrupt doctrine from the pits of hell. God has used Colin Kaepernick, one of 7 men named Nick that God uses to point to the Nicolaitan doctrine and works of the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea, which is Calvinism and free grace, otherwise known as easy believism and properly known as antinomianism, and their offspring doctrines of once saved, always saved, the myth of imputed righteousness, our righteousness is as filthy rags, one verse that's taken out of context, misunderstood, and flatly contradicts many other passages in the Bible. All Christians will be raptured, and no lordship salvation. And what could be called happy Christianity or practical Christianity, where coming to Jesus is seen more as a life improvement than a need for a savior from sin. And what is perhaps the worst and most unfortunate doctrine of all of them, the doctrine of predestination and election, which to them says that people are predestined to go to heaven or hell before they are even born. In the book of Revelation chapter 2, Jesus said that he hates this Nicolaitan doctrine and works, and that he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those whose works are a result of this Nicolaitan doctrine and on those who teach this Nicolaitan doctrine. To learn how God has clearly communicated through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day are the doctrines that I just listed, watch the other videos on this channel. And also importantly, watch the videos on other channels that I will link to in the description box below. Doctrine is very important. One of the biggest problems within evangelical culture is anti-intellectualism, which says that one's ignorance is equal to another person's knowledge. But the prophet Hosea wrote in chapter 6, verse 4, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge." Another major aspect of the corrupt church culture that is the root of this problem of bad doctrine is the model of assembly inherited from the corrupt Catholic Church system. This model of a so-called pastor standing on a stage behind a podium for an hour speaking to people sitting in rows. A dictatorship of one man where all information is censored and no one else is allowed to speak to the group, except on the rare occasion where the individual has the dictator's permission. This system is evil and is responsible for a lot of the bad fruit in the church today. An appropriate analogy is how this church model parallels the evils of a socialist political dictatorship, which engenders an immature and weak individual and citizenry. The church will be persecuted through the mark of the Antichrist, and as explained, a series of 2s symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. 222 days before this fire on the roof of the Stadium for the Saints was February 11th, 2021, which was the day of the 133 car pileup on the highway in Dallas. It was mostly hospital workers that crashed their cars, as the local hospital was changing shifts at that hour. This confirmed the mark of the Antichrist is the VACCINE. This 222 days connection to this car pileup also confirms that the VACCINE is the mark, because this clogged highway symbolizes the clogged arteries that the VACCINE produces. This car pileup occurred on the date 2/11, which hints at 2 times 11 equals 22. The number 22 symbolizes the 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. This confirms this 222 days connection from the car pileup that points to the VACCINE to the day of the fire on the roof of the stadium for the saints, which confirms that the saints will be persecuted through the VACCINE. Pentecost symbolizes the church, and Pentecost means 50th day. Pentecost is also known as the Feast of Weeks, hence why 50 weeks connections are prophetic. Dallas symbolizes the American Evangelical Church, and this car pileup in Dallas was exactly 50 weeks after it was announced that former Dallas Cowboys star quarterback Tony Romo signed a TV contract worth $17 million, which was an unheard of amount and would have made him the 17th highest paid quarterback in the league. Romo wore jersey number 9, which makes this a pairing of the numbers 9 and 17 that identifies Obama as the Antichrist that will persecute the American Evangelical Church. Obama was president from 2009 until 2017 and first arrived in Washington as the senator from Illinois in the 109th Congress, lived on 109th Street in New York City while attending Columbia, and will return as the President Antichrist in the 117th Congress, which began on January 3rd, 2021. The number 9 symbolizes judgment, and Romo, player number 9 for Dallas, symbolizes judgment on the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea. The day of this former Dallas quarterback's contract connects with 50 weeks to the day of the car pileup in Dallas, which connects to the day of the fire on the roof of the stadium for the Saints. On the same day as Romo's contract was the news of the massive fire at the Gare de Lyon train station in Paris. Lyon means lion, which symbolizes the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Romo's contract and the Gare de Lyon fire were in turn exactly 50 weeks after the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand that killed 50 people and injured 50 people. The Christchurch massacre symbolized judgment on Christ's church, which is why exactly 50 weeks later was the player number 9 Dallas Cowboys Gare de Lyon fire sign, which in turn was 50 weeks before the massive car pileup in Dallas, which in turn was 222 days to the roof fire on the stadium for the Saints. The Christchurch massacre was infamous for its 17 minutes of live video footage that went viral on social media. This 17 minutes occurred 50 weeks after Player 9's $17 million contract. And this is another pairing of the numbers 9 and 17 that identify Obama. This 17 minutes shooting that killed 50 people and injured 50 people paralleled the shooting in the high school in Parkland, Florida that killed 17 people and injured 17 people, which was exactly 144,000 hours after 9/11, when 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart. The number 144,000 is a prominent and prophetic number in the book of Revelation. Exactly 2 months after the shooting in the 2 mosques in Christchurch, which was infamous for its 17 minutes of video footage, leaders from 17 nations gathered in Paris for the Christ Church call to action. They discussed how to censor the internet, which was truthfully about how to censor conservatives and Christians. This meeting in Paris regarded the Christ Church massacre, and the Christ Church massacre was exactly 50 weeks after the fire at the Gare de Lyon train station in Paris. 3 days after the Christ Church massacre, 3 people died in the shooting in the Netherlands at a train station. This shooting at this train station occurred 3 days and then 50 weeks before the fire at the train station in Paris. This train station in the Netherlands is named October 24th. This station is named after United Nations Day, which is October 24th, and is named in commemoration of the first official day of the United Nations in 1945. This 3 deaths at the station October 24th that occurred 3 days after the Christ Church massacre communicated that the church will be persecuted through the Antichrist and the coming new incarnation of the United Nations and the new world government. And so this prophetic shooting at the train station named after the United Nations connects with the fire on the roof of the Stadium for the Saints on the same day that the United Nations opened. And the main aspect of the story was how this fire occurred just days before the Saints' opener for the season against the team from New York. This shooting at the train station named for the United Nations, in which 3 people died, was 3 days after the Christ Church massacre, in which 50 people died and 50 people were injured, which in turn was exactly 50 weeks before the Gare de Lyon train station fire on the same day as the Dallas quarterback's contract, which was in turn 50 weeks exactly to the car pileup in Dallas that involved hospital workers, and the clogged highway symbolized the clogged artery that is the result of the VACCINE, which is the mark of the Antichrist, which in turn was 222 days to Hurricane Ida, which as a result canceled the football game between the Saints and the Cardinals, which in turn was 23 days to the fire on the roof of the Stadium for the Saints just prior to the season opener against the team from New York on the same day that the United Nations opened in New York. 9 months and 11 days back from the fire on the roof of the Stadium for the Saints was the day of Trump's Oval Office speech regarding the VACCINE. Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his signs. Also, an Oval Office speech is a big deal for a president. Trump's Oval Office VACCINE speech on December 11, 2020 was exactly 90 weeks after March 23, 2019, and the day of a fire in the Trump Tower in Westchester, New York. 5 floors were evacuated. This was the same day as the spontaneous Trump rally in front of Trump Tower in Manhattan on the day that Mueller's report came out and exonerated Trump. These tower signs that included a fire and evacuation of 5 floors occurred exactly 50 weeks after the fire on the 50th floor of Trump Tower in Manhattan that killed 1 person. This 50th floor fire was 50 days before the extremely prophetic Pentecost in 2018, and Pentecost means 50th day. And this Trump Tower fire on the 50th floor, 50 days before Pentecost, was part of a prophetic trail of signs that paralleled the timing of events in the book of Joshua. That was a countdown to Pentecost that symbolized a countdown to the day the walls of security collapsed on Jericho. And on this prophetic Pentecost in 2018, one of the extremely profound signs we received was the Indy 500 sign. in which the harlot Danica Patrick, which symbolized the harlot Rahab in the story in the book of Joshua, in her final race of her career, slammed into the wall. 90 weeks symbolizes the number 9 and judgment, and 90 weeks back from Trump's VACCINE speech were the Trump Tower signs on March 23, 2019, which in turn were exactly 9 years after Obama signed his Obamacare Act, which is the thing Obama's presidency is most known for. 9 years between the 23rd of March in 2010 and the 23rd of March in 2019 is a pairing of the numbers 9 and 23 that confirm the signs and connections and identify Barack Obama as the Antichrist. 9 years connections are extremely prophetic. Obamacare connects with Trump's VACCINE speech, which confirms that the federal government healthcare system will persecute God's people through the VACCINE. The number 9 symbolizes judgment. Obamacare connects with 9 years and then 90 weeks to Trump's VACCINE speech. Trump's VACCINE speech on December 11th, 2020 was exactly 9 months after March 11th, 2020. 9 months symbolizes judgment and also a birth and the birth pains of the end times. Since June of 2019, I had predicted that something very big and bad would occur and world-changing would occur on March 11th, 2020. And this was the only date in 2020 that I had said this about. Besides the event I was expecting for Pentecost in 2020, which was a different type of thing than what I was expecting for March 11th, 2020. On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization officially declared coronavirus to be a pandemic. As well, on March 11th, 2020, Trump delivered his Oval Office coronavirus speech that went for 11 minutes and ended precisely as the clock on the live TV news screen ticked 9/11. March 11th, 2020 was exactly 222 months after Flight 11 crashed the Twin Towers on 9/11. Hence why Trump's speech was 11 minutes long and ended at 9:11 p.m. The 222 months connection points to George Washington, who was born on February 22nd, the date 222, because through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to George Washington. And this 222 months connection also hints at the Tav mark and the mark of the Antichrist, which is the VACCINE, which is why 222 months after 9/11 was the official announcement that COVID was a pandemic. On the same day that the World Health Organization officially declared coronavirus to be a pandemic, and Trump delivered his prophetic Oval Office coronavirus address 222 months after 9/11, was that this was when the first sports league shut down, the NBA, the National Basketball Association, which hints at the basketball president Antichrist, shut down after the first player tested positive for coronavirus. This same player happened to be in the news 2 days earlier for having mocked coronavirus. In a press conference, he mocked coronavirus, and this was a national news story, and this same player ended up being the first player to test positive, and thereby shutting down the NBA. This player mocked coronavirus on the 9th of March and then tested positive on the 11th of March, coronavirus day, which was 222 months after 9/11 and was the day that Trump's speech ended at 9:11 p.m. His mocking coronavirus on the 9th and then testing positive on the 11th hinted at 9/11. This player plays for the team from the 45th state named Jazz. Jazz music is synonymous with trumpets, which points to the 45th president, President Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his signs. This is why this player for the team from the 45th state was the first player that shut down the basketball league on the same day that the 45th president delivered his prophetic Oval Office coronavirus speech. After this player had mocked coronavirus, in the locker room he was horsing around and unknowingly gave player number 45 coronavirus. This ended up creating a feud between the two teammates, which was a news story. These two teammates, including player number 45, both played for the team from the 45th state, and Trump has a public and well-known feud with the senator, a fellow Republican, a teammate from the 45th state, whom he trolled publicly for having tested negative for coronavirus. This was 2 times 7 days after Trump's coronavirus speech, and in the middle of these 2 sets of 7 days, 7 days after Trump's coronavirus speech, was the prophetic earthquake in the 45th state, in which the trumpet fell from the iconic statue on top of the historic temple in Salt Lake City. This angel statue symbolizes the angel in chapter 14 of the book of Revelation that trumpets the beginning of the end times period. This fall of this trumpet in the 45th state hinted at the fall of President Trump, and this statue was designed by a man named Cyrus, and Trump is God's King Cyrus that is described in the book of Isaiah, chapter 45. On the same day that the trumpet fell in the 45th state in the prophetic earthquake was the day of the death of one of the last astronauts that had been to the moon, and God associates prophetic moon signs with President Trump, who was born on the day of a prophetic blood moon, exactly 700 days before Israel was reborn. And so this astronaut that died on the day that the trumpet fell in the 45th state is pointing to the death of the 45th president, President Trump. And this death of this astronaut was 7 days after Trump's coronavirus speech. And it was at the beginning of the quarantine lockdowns. And it so happens that one of the aspects of the story of this astronaut's trip to the moon was how when he returned from the moon, he was subjected to a quarantine for many days. What confirms that March 11th, 2020 was the day that symbolizes COVID was that on the anniversary, on March 11th, 2021, Biden delivered his first public address since he stole the White House, which was his VACCINE speech. And he said that this day, March 11th, 2021, was the anniversary of COVID. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that this video is, in a way, a continuation of the Canada Day Prophecy video. I have recently updated the Canada Day Prophecy video. This Canada Day Prophecy video is one of the most important videos on this channel. There are 2 parts to this Canada Day Prophecy video. Part 2 explains some of the other amazing signs we received on July 1st. It also needs to be mentioned that the Suez Canal ship prophecy video explains the extremely important prophetic significance of this collapsed building on Kennedy Street in Washington, D.C. on July 1st, the same day as the 2 prophetic tornadoes. The Suez Canal ship prophecy video is also one of the most important videos on this channel. It is imperative that everyone watch these videos and learn what God was communicating through these signs. Please take my advice. You must know what God is communicating, and especially in these videos, through especially the July 1st signs. Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Coming full circle, the Chicago Cubs-Dodgers no-hitter, the 7th no-hitter in baseball this season, was exactly 153 weeks after the duck boat tragedy in which 17 people drowned, 9 of which were from the same family. Again, 9 times 17 equals 153. I mentioned that this no-hitter was stunning confirmation of this connection. How so? First of all, as I explained in part 1 of the Canada Day prophecy video, the number 153 symbolizes the 153 fish that were caught in the net in Jesus' last miracle, and these 153 fish symbolize the end of the age of fishing for men. Jesus began the age of fishing for men with 12 disciples plus himself for a total of 13 men. Therefore, in the following equation, the number 13 symbolizes the beginning of the age of fishing for men, and the number 153 symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men. 13 times 153 equals 1989. And so 1989 years symbolizes the age of fishing for men. This 153 weeks connection connects to the no-hitter against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers played in the extremely prophetic 2018 World Series. The 2018 World Series was the 29th anniversary of the 1989 World Series, in which the prophetic World Series earthquake occurred in the opening minutes of the broadcast of Game 3. It is explained in other videos how this was a massive judgment warning sign for America. We know from the Gospel of Luke that Jesus began the age of fishing for men in 29 AD, because it says it began in the 15th year of Tiberius, who was emperor beginning in 14 AD. 14 plus 15 equals 29 AD. As well, for the prophecy students that are interested, I will leave in the description box below a link that explains that it is required there be 5,888 moons in between the decree date and the triumphal entry. The year of the triumphal entry required an extra month of Adar, and the only relevant year that had an extra Adar was 32 AD. It is absolutely impossible that Jesus arrived in any other year or began the age of fishing for men in any year other than 29 AD. Furthermore, God's signs that I am in the middle of explaining also prove this beyond a doubt. Therefore, 29 AD plus 13 times 153 years, which is 1989 years of fishing for men, equals 2018. This is why the 29th anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake in Game 3 was so extremely prophetic. There were a myriad of signs in the 2018 World Series that confirmed this connection and this relevance of it being the 29th anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake. And one example is that the earthquake hit during the opening minutes of the broadcast right after the song that ABC station played of the singer James Taylor. And this same singer, James Taylor, sang the national anthem at Fenway Park before Game 1, the opening of the 2018 World Series. Game 3 of the 2018 World Series was the longest game in World Series history. It was known for going past midnight, and it was known for its winning home run by the Dodgers player that had, as the media described it, a rags to riches story, thus making this a Cinderella story, which hinted at Jesus' parable about the rapture of the bride at the midnight cry. After this winning home run was hit by the Dodgers after midnight, the Dodgers team and Dodgers fans let out a cry of joy. What confirms this prophetic Cinderella story sign is that it occurred exactly 70 weeks after Tropical Storm Cindy hit the U.S. Gulf Coast. The 70 weeks prophecy is the most central prophecy in the Bible in the book of Daniel, and it regards the period of the end times and the Antichrist's rule and the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. So 9 times 17 equals 153, and this 153 weeks connection between the duckboat tragedy of 17 deaths, 9 from the same family, to the Dodgers no-hitter on June 24th is relevant because the number 153 is very relevant in context of the Dodgers. Because the 2018 World Series involving the Dodgers was the 29th anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake, and 13 times 153 equals 1989, hence why this 2018 Dodgers World Series symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men. Secondly, obviously, we are looking for the numbers 9 and 17 in this no-hitter to confirm this connection. First, it was the 17th no-hitter in Chicago Cubs history. This is amazing, and it is the number 17 we are looking for. Also, 7 days and then 390 days later, the barge on the Niagara River will crash over Niagara Falls, which is all Noah's flood symbolism. And God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark, and Noah's flood began in Genesis 7:17, and this seventh no-hitter of the season was the 17th no-hitter in Cubs history. Also, the flood ended on the 17th day of the 7th month. Also, again, God uses the city of Chicago and the Cubs to point to the 44th president, the Antichrist. And this no-hitter was unique in that 4 Cubs pitchers combined to pitch this no-hitter, which won the game for the Cubs 4-0. And so 4-0 and 4 pitchers hints at the 44th president, who is from Chicago. Again, it was the Cubs' 17th no-hitter in franchise history, and the number 17 hints at the Antichrist, who will be vanquished from the Temple Mount, which is what pitching from the pitching mound symbolizes, on the Day of Atonement in 2024, which is the 10th day of the 7th month, which is what the number 17 hints at. And again, the Antichrist and Antichrist system are symbolized in the book of Revelation by the beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns, which the number 17 also hints at. And so again, we are looking for the numbers 17 and 9 in this prophetic sign with this no-hitter between the Cubs and the Dodgers. And here we have a clear 17. What about the number 9? God often uses the last outs of games for his signs. The last out in this no-hitter was a strikeout that was pitched by player number 46. The number 46 hints at the 46th presidential term during which the Antichrist will rise to power. This last out by player number 46 was 9 months and 11 days after the Cubs' last no-hitter on the date 9/13 in 2020, in which star player number 44 made the final out at first base. The date 9/13 hints at 9 times 13 equals 117, which points to the Antichrist coming to power in the 117th Congress that began on January 3rd, 2021. In this final out that first baseman player number 44 made, the ball was thrown to him by player number 9, and the number 9 symbolizes judgment, one of the 3 most important numbers God uses profusely in his end times big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Altogether, this communicated judgment and the Antichrist, President 44, coming to power in the 117th Congress. This player 44 also made the final out in the extremely prophetic 2016 World Series when the Cubs broke their curse of the Billy Goat, which is Antichrist symbolism. What is stunning confirmation of this breaking of the curse of the Billy Goat is that, as I mentioned earlier, in ancient Israel, the Jews would conduct a ritual sacrifice on the Temple Mount using 2 goats on the Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. And this final out that broke the curse of the Billy Goat that was made by player number 44 was a ball thrown to him by player number 17. And again, the number 17 hints at the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month. All of this is communicating the vanquished goat Antichrist on the Temple Mount at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement in 2024. This World Series was between the 2 teams with the longest droughts, both with sports curses, Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians. And again, God uses Cleveland to point to Grover Cleveland, to point to Obama, and he uses Chicago to point to Barack Obama. This final game of this 2016 World Series was known for its 17 minutes rain delay after the game was tied after 9 innings, which was a pairing of the numbers 9 and 17, which revealed Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017. This 17 minutes sign was one of many 17 minutes signs that point to 9/11 and the 2 towers that were struck 17 minutes apart. The 44th president hosted the 2016 Chicago Cubs at the White House 4 days before he left office. Player 44 presented the 44th president jersey number 44 4 days before he left office. This prophetic baseball sign at this temporary end of his time in Washington, D.C. as a ruler mirrored or bookended the prophetic baseball sign that coincided with the beginning of his time in Washington, D.C. as a ruler, as the senator from Illinois. 6 days before he was elected the senator from Illinois to Washington, D.C., when the Boston Red Sox broke their curse by sweeping the Cardinals 4-0 after having swept the New York Yankees 4-0 in 2004. And again, the night that the Red Sox broke their sports curse was the only night in baseball history that there was a blood moon lunar eclipse during a World Series game. And again, that game in 2004, when the Red Sox swept the Cardinals 4-0 after having swept the Yankees 4-0, was exactly 7 years, which symbolizes the end times, before the prophetic Game 4 in the Red Sox-Dodgers World Series, which was known for the 4-0 blown lead after pitcher number 44 was pulled too early from the game. The player's name was Rich Hill, and this was the same day as the 4 police officers were wounded in the shooting in Rich Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. And God uses prophetic signs of pitchers on the pitcher's mound to symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. So, the last out in the June 24th no-hitter was made by Chicago Cubs player 46. And 9 months and 11 days earlier, the last out in the no-hitter on September 13th, 2020 was made by player 44. 46 plus 44 equals 90. A number God uses frequently to hint at the number 9. So with it being the Chicago Cubs' 17th no-hitter, we have our numbers 17 and 9 in the June 24th no-hitter. And 9 times 17 equals 153, which is why this occurred exactly 153 weeks after the duck boat sank, killing 9 from the same family. And again, the Chicago Cubs' June 24th no-hitter was against the Dodgers, and the September 13th Chicago Cubs no-hitter, in which the last out was made by player 44, was 44 days before the Dodgers won the 2020 World Series. The reason for God's purpose for this prediction for this Niagara barge crashing over Niagara Falls, and the reason for this prediction for the stock market on October 19th, is to prove that everything that has been stated in this video is true. This is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and the conclusions are true. Once this prediction has come to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel and read the homepage of the website TrumpPrediction.com or HarrisCrashPrediction.com. Time is running out, and if for some reason you don't have enough time to watch all of the videos on this channel, I will leave a list of the most important videos in the description box below this video or on the homepage of the website. In terms of God's prophetic signs and knowing what God is doing, after having watched this video, you are now one of the most informed people on the planet. The question is, what will you now do with this information? And how many people will you help get this video to? Keep on posting the link to this video everywhere in social media. And if you would like the PDF file for the flyer I hand out on busy street corners, place on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put in mailboxes, please contact me at darrenjacksinbox@gmail.com. In my opinion, every single believer, unless they have a health condition, should be doing something like this in the streets every day. Also, everyone should have some of these flyers in their pockets, handing them out as they go about their daily business, when they walk from their car into the bank or to the grocery store. As they walk up and down the aisles of the grocery store, hand them out to people. I personally don't know what someone is thinking if they are not doing this. And if someone thinks that they are too shy to do this, what I have to say is get over it. Courage isn't a lack of fear, it is action in spite of it. And God wants us to be courageous for him. Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, so that the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any of them, that person is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at the watchman's hand. Revelation 12:8. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, and in this case faithless implies a doing, action, the detestable, as for the murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. In other words, this is a warning to be courageous and not cowardly or lazy. I personally believe that the flyer that I hand out is absolutely what is needed right now. But if it isn't my flyer, everyone should be handing out something as they go about their daily business. I personally believe that everyone has 20 minutes to an hour a day at least to be handing out flyers in these last days. But if you for some reason don't think that you do, you can be handing them out as you go about your daily business. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. The Pope is the first of the two antichrists. Catholicism isn't the Bible and isn't Christianity. There will likely be a massive Mary ghost that the whole world will see, but it will be demonic deception. Praying to Mary is praying to demons. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. All of the supernatural experiences that Catholics experience that confirm for them that Catholicism is true are demonic deception. The same applies to all other false religions and New Age spirituality. In 2 Thessalonians, it says we get the deception we ask for. In other words, it is foolish to rely on spiritual or mystical experiences, and those that do are asking for demonic deception. The supernatural highs from yoga and meditation are demonic deception. They are the counterfeit Holy Spirit. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. There is absolutely no New Age or collective consciousness type of explanation for how these predictions were known ahead of time. They were known ahead of time through Bible prophecy and watching for God's prophetic signs. Jesus was not just another supposed enlightened master like the supposedly enlightened Buddha. Jesus was God incarnate, and he is the only way to eternal life and to God the Father. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. The purpose of the predictions in this video, the reason for God giving me a voice through these predictions in this video that will come to pass, is to prove the following things. The God of the Bible and Israel is the true God. God has a son, and he died for everyone. Everyone can be saved if they repent of sin and put their trust in him. That what is being explained on this channel is God's true big picture of signs. That the other assertions in this video are true, including that the doctrine of imminence, that we cannot know the precise day of his return, is false. That the doctrine that we cannot know right now the identity of the Antichrist is false. The VACCINEs are a spiritual abomination. The VACCINE is the mark of the Antichrist. It is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. The VACCINE is part of a transformative process that is leading to demonic possession. As Bible prophecy says, those that take the mark of the Antichrist are going to hell. The reason God has given me a voice through this prediction is to absolutely prove that the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a result of this false doctrine, which is a false gospel and doctrine straight from the pits of hell, is sovereign grace, commonly known as irresistible grace, which comes in the package called Calvinism, and what is called free grace, commonly referred to as unconditional grace, sometimes referred to as easy believism or cheap grace. It comes in a package called dispensationalism. Sovereign grace and free grace both come to the heretical conclusion of once saved, always saved. No one is saved past tense. No one is saved until they get to heaven, and one must remain in the faith while they are here on earth, which includes taking action. Sovereign grace and free grace can be properly referred to as antinomianism, a word rooted in Latin meaning against law. This heretical theology produces other related heretical doctrine. That is also the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth, such as no lordship salvation, which is the opposite of what the followers of no lordship salvation disparagingly call lordship salvation, the doctrine of predestination of the elect, that people are predestined before birth to go to heaven or hell. This doctrine that is straight from the pits of hell, which has its origin through Calvin and Luther and Augustine in the Gnostics, which John in his letters called Antichrist. Watch the links to videos in the description box below that refute the passages that these people claim support this doctrine of predestination of the elect. Once saved, always saved, also known as eternal security. The myth of imputed righteousness. Our righteousness is as filthy rags, a verse that Martin Luther isolated to develop his unfortunate theology, and the doctrine that all Christians will be raptured. Through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God has indisputably pointed to and identified these Nicolaitan doctrines. He has pointed to sovereign grace and free grace specifically. And again, the purpose for this prediction and the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this. When this prediction comes to pass, it will prove everything that I have just said. The majority of Christianity follows these doctrines. It is also the reason why the majority of Christianity is not able to recognize the mark of the Antichrist, and why they are presently in the process of taking the mark of the Antichrist. It is judgment on the church. The lukewarm church of Laodicea that has lost its saltiness and is no longer good for anything except to be trampled under the feet of men. Had the mark been completely obvious to every Christian, it would have defeated this purpose of deceiving those that have lost their saltiness. The dispensational belief in a supposed distinction between supposed church age saints and tribulation saints is a product of their false Nicolaitan doctrine of free grace or unconditional grace. This false belief in supposed church age saints and tribulation saints is wicked deception, and it is one reason why the followers of this doctrine are deceived into believing that the VACCINE, as it is right now in its current form, is not the mark of the Antichrist, and is instead a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, they do not have the spiritual eyes to perceive the truth because it is judgment on them for this doctrine. The ongoing argument between, on the one side, sovereign grace Calvinists and free grace dispensationalists, and those that don't have a systematic theology, a systematic way of interpreting the Bible, non-Calvinists and non-dispensationalists, that believe we have a free will, not some sort of unnecessary paradox between predeterminism and a free will, but a genuine, sincere free will, is very real. Each side believes the other side is very gravely and dangerously wrong, and therefore one side is in fact very gravely and dangerously wrong. The prediction in this video proves that God has demonstrated with which side he is very angry and which is gravely and dangerously wrong. That said, however, there was no excuse for people that follow sovereign grace and free grace theology and have the works that are a result of this theology, because all one needed to do was not ignore the countless passages that contradict their theology and read the Bible as a whole instead of isolating passages in order to proof text their position. Doctrine is important. One of the problems within evangelical culture is anti-intellectualism, which says that one's ignorance is equal to another one's knowledge. Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest to me. Make sure you watch the videos that I will link to in the description box below regarding doctrine. Learn what the early church fathers believed and how it does not comport with what Christians believe today, and how they would see what Christians believe today as being heresy. Learn what the early church fathers believed before the Western church was corrupted by Augustine in the 5th century, when he joined the Catholic Church after being an official auditor in the Gnostic Manichaean sect for 9 years. After this prediction has come to pass, and the warning I am making here, I don't know what in the world someone is thinking if they choose to not watch all of the videos in the description box regarding doctrine. Also visit the website predictionsproveit.com. The problem within the church is that Christians don't really fear God. The root of this problem of a lack of fear of God is bad theology and doctrine. There is one key verse in the Bible that is essential for understanding the Bible, which speaks to the primary importance of fear of God. Genesis 22:12. He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Prior to this, God did not know that Abraham feared him, and Abraham had not demonstrated his faith. This was after God had accounted Abraham righteous for believing. James 2:17. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. James said this in context of two examples that he provided. which was how Rahab and Abraham demonstrated their faith through their actions. And this type of demonstration of faith that God is looking for typically involves risk and sacrifice. It is going to cost something. As Jesus said, one needs to become like a kernel of wheat and die and go into the ground before it can produce fruit. This death of the self before being born again costs something, and ultimately one's demonstration of faith for truth and righteousness could theoretically, literally cost someone their life. God is looking for those that fear him. It is the rare individual that fears God more than man. It is the rare individual that is willing to demonstrate his faith and fear of God and stand up for truth and righteousness. The mark of the Antichrist is beautifully designed to elicit this demonstration of faith. For example, any Christian that took the VACCINE mark of the Antichrist, knowing that fetal stem cells were used in its development, does not fear God. Also, everyone should know by now that the masks are a lie. The size of the virus is 1 micron, and no mask filters below 3 microns. Even medical masks don't prevent the virus. These masks are like trying to keep mosquitoes out of one's backyard through using a chain link fence. This is why before it became political, every single Western country, as part of their protocol for a possible pandemic, included not recommending masks for the population, which is why even Fauci recommended not wearing masks at the beginning of COVID. For those with spiritual eyes to see, it is clear that wearing the masks is for the purpose of virtue signaling that you are a member of the COVID cult. And ultimately, they demonstrate spiritual allegiance to Satan. The masks are for identifying the enemy and waging political and spiritual war on conservatives and Christians. If there is a supposed precursor to the VACCINE, it is definitely masks. No Christian should be wearing masks unless it is absolutely necessary, like boarding an airplane. And Christians should not be participating in religious worship inside a church with other people wearing masks. These people are deceived, period. It doesn't matter. They are deceived. They might be nice people. They might seem like Christians, but if they are wearing masks and social distancing inside a church, they don't get it, and they are part of the COVID cult, which is about spiritual allegiance to Satan. Most people believe that the Nicolaitan works Jesus referred to was gross, blatant sinning, and that the Nicolaitan doctrine is somehow the perverse doctrine in, quote, those other churches, unquote, but certainly not in their church. This is absolutely not true. God's big picture of signs has undeniably communicated that the Nicolaitan doctrine is what I have outlined here, and the vast majority of Christianity follows this doctrine. An example of Nicolaitan works and someone that does not fear God is someone that is not handing out flyers. This Nicolaitan works is expressed, for example, with someone that has been hypnotized by the political cult of COVID and is wearing masks. And wearing a mask in a place of worship in church is an abomination. This Nicolaitan works is expressed with someone that is not speaking out against the evil that is overtaking the land, which includes, for example, speaking out against people in church wearing masks. Eric Metaxas is currently being blacklisted by the Sovereign Grace Calvinists for drawing the parallel between these faith alone doctrine Christians and the Christians in Nazi Germany. Metaxas has rightly claimed that the evangelical church is on the hook for and is responsible for the stolen election. Those supposed Christians that are idly standing by and not taking action and speaking out against the evil that is marching over the land are the Nicolaitans. They are the lazy, lukewarm, cowardly Christians, and they have lost their saltiness. They are no longer good for anything except to be trampled under the feet of men, which is why many of them are taking the VACCINE mark of the Antichrist, which is the inverse of the mark that was given in Ezekiel chapter 9 to those that were crying out for justice and righteousness. Contrary to the false doctrine of dispensationalism, which is the package in which free grace comes in, which says that there is supposedly a distinction between supposed church-age saints and tribulation saints, which, by the way, is a main reason why these evangelicals are not able to recognize the mark of the Antichrist, which is this VACCINE. It is judgment on these Christians from God for this free grace dispensationalism, church age saints versus tribulation saints false doctrine. The truth is, the main purpose of the end times period is to test the faith of saints. And this test comes through the Antichrist and the persecution and the mark of the Antichrist. It is designed to compel these lukewarm Christians to finally stand up for truth and righteousness and demonstrate their faith through risk and sacrifice. And those that will be raptured, those that will be spared the tribulation, those that will be worthy to escape the things that are coming, as Jesus said to always pray for, will be those that have already passed the test of faith. They will be those that have already demonstrated their faith through risk and sacrifice. This is what I believe is the primary distinction between who will be spared the tribulation and who will not, given that the purpose of the tribulation is to test the faith of the saints. It is an act of God's love, because if we had not done so, having then gotten to the kingdom, we will have regretted it, not demonstrating our faith and doing more and taking a risk for him and sacrificing for him. And so those that have already been doing that do not need to go through the tribulation. And this, I believe, is what would constitute being worthy of escaping the things that are coming. Obviously, when these predictions come to pass, you will know that you should watch all of the videos on this channel, beginning with the videos that are linked to in the description box below this video. I strongly recommend not going through the videos on this channel in random fashion, selecting titles that may be interesting, but rather I strongly recommend following my recommendations that are listed in the description box below this video. This channel is not a daily or weekly update on the latest news. Rather, this channel is a library that has documented God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Hopefully you at least found this introduction video to be interesting, and if so, please leave a like and upvote the video, and please consider sharing the video. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com, or PredictionsProveIt.com, and also check out the other information that I have linked to on the website. You should also pause this video right now and make a note of my other social media outlets. You never know when you will need them, and you might not be able to find them later. Also, if you want to download these videos as podcasts, I now have a podcast channel at Podbean, which is named Predictions Prove It.